28th, 2025. Picture this, right? The Oval Office.
Yeah.
Zelenskyy, president of Ukraine, sitting across from, well, former President Trump.
Oh.
A minerals deal's on the table, but, it's the war with Russia that's really hanging over everything. You can just feel the tension.
I bet.
And then, bam, Trump slams his hand on the table.
Oh.
You're gambling with millions of lives.
Did that.
Yeah, straight up. It was a moment, right? More than just some meeting, it was like seeing those global fault lines, the ones this whole Ukraine war has just ripped open.
Definitely.
So today, that's what we're diving into. How did we get here? How did this conflict evolve? The debate over Western aid and, man, how this war is changing everything, like rewriting the rules for 21st century warfare.
It's wild, isn't it? And you know what? I think to really grasp it, we got to rewind a bit, understand the history, the currents that run way deeper.
Okay, time travel time. Hit us with the Ukrainian-Russian relations crash course. What are the historical milestones our listeners got to know?
Well, Ukraine's history, it's complicated, going way back to the Kievan Rus.
Right.
But the big thing is its relationship with Russia. Been part of the Russian Empire, part of the Soviet era, all that.
Right.
And then 1991, huge year. Independence from the collapsing Soviet Union.
Yeah, and then within that, you've got the 94 Budapest Memorandum. Why is that agreement so important now?
Huge deal.
Yeah.
Ukraine had this massive nuclear arsenal left over from the Soviets, third largest in the world at the time.
Wow.
And they agreed to give it up, the whole thing. In exchange, Russia, the U.S., UK, they all pledged to respect Ukraine's territory, their sovereignty.
Security guarantee for denuclearization.
Exactly. And that's where it all starts to unravel, leading to the crisis we see today. Because fast forward to 2014, Russia just violates that agreement, takes Crimea, backs separatists in the Donbass.
Broken promise, big time. So what happened in those years leading up to 2014?
Internal Ukrainian politics, they were a big factor. You had the Orange Revolution in 2004, then the Euromaidan protests in 2013. It showed just how divided Ukraine was. Some wanted to be closer to Russia, others looked to Europe.
And then it was President Yanukovych, the pro-Russian guy.
Right.
He rejects an EU agreement. That's what sets off the Euromaidan protests. Leads to him being ousted.
Exactly. And that's Russia's cue. They take Crimea fast, almost no bloodshed after a referendum that, well, a lot of people question. Then, boom, the Donbass war starts. Russian-backed separatists fighting the Ukrainian government.
And even with the Minsk agreements trying to calm things down, the fighting just kept simmering.
For years. And that's the backdrop to the full-scale invasion in 2022.
Which is what really shook the world, right? Went from a regional thing to like a full-blown war right on Europe's doorstep.
Totally. The scale, the brutality, it caught a lot of people off guard. Russian troops just pouring over the border, attacking Kiev, Kharkiv, going after ports in the south.
And we saw those images every day, Ukrainians taking up arms, fighting back.
Yeah. The resilience of the Ukrainian people, it's been amazing. Slowed the Russians down, inflicted losses, really defied expectations.
Okay, so key turning points since 2022. The siege of Mariupol, the battle for Severodonetsk, Ukraine's counteroffensive in Kharkiv. What moments have really shaped this war?
Ugh, there's so many. Mariupol, the fall of it, especially the Azovstal steel plant, that was so symbolic. And then you've got the liberation of Kherson, end of 22. Huge strategic win for Ukraine. It all shows you how this war has ebbed and flowed, the human cost, the strength of the Ukrainian forces, even when things looked grim.
And we can't forget the humanitarian crisis. Millions of people displaced, cities destroyed, the loss of life. Plus, this war's impact, it goes way beyond Ukraine's borders.
Absolutely. Energy prices, food supplies, global trade, it's all been disrupted. This war, it's a stress test for the global economy, for international relations, everything.
Yeah, and it's shown how divided the world is. The West sending military aid, financial aid, sanctions on Russia. But then you have China, India, they're more neutral.
Right. It's this fractured response. How far will the West go? What happens if this drags on? What does it mean for the whole geopolitical landscape? So many questions.
And those are questions we're going to keep digging into in the next part of our deep dive.
Oh.
Welcome back to our deep dive. Last time we covered a lot of ground, right? The history, the lead up to this crisis. And we ended on that, well, that divided response from the world, all those questions hanging over the conflict.
Yeah, and one of the big ones, maybe the one that gets people fired up the most, is the whole Western aid thing. Is it like our moral duty to back Ukraine, or is this a gamble, a strategic risk with who knows what consequences?
And that debate, it's everywhere, not just governments or experts, but like regular people talking too. So we figured, let's see what our listeners think. We put out a poll, right? Asked, is Western aid to Ukraine a moral duty or a strategic gamble?
The results are in.
Oh, wow, the response was huge. Really shows you how much this issue is dividing folks.
Yeah, so out of thousands of votes, 53% said moral duty, 47% said strategic gamble. It's almost perfectly split. Wow. That just shows you how complicated this is.
Definitely. And reading through the comments, it was just as interesting as the numbers themselves. Lots of passion, from those who support aid, talking about standing up to aggression, defending democracy, the whole idea that, like, we can't let might make right globally.
Yeah, there's real moral outrage at what's happening, a conviction that the West can't just sit back and do nothing.
Right. Some of the comments, really powerful stuff. Like one person said, imagine we abandon Ukraine. What message does that send to anyone else facing a similar threat?
Right, exactly. And they said it would embolden those autocrats and, undermine the whole idea of a rules-based world.
Yeah, strong argument. But then you have the other side. Those who see aid as a risk, as a gamble, they have valid points, too. Worries about things escalating, about getting pulled into a bigger war with Russia. And then the cost, economically, if this drags on forever.
Right. There was one comment, I remember it clearly, it said, we got problems here at home. We need to focus on that. How can we justify spending billions on a war that seems like it'll never end?
Right, and then there's the idea that, look, Ukraine's fight is heroic and all, but is it really in the best interest of the West to be so deeply involved? Could drain resources, distract us from other important stuff?
For sure. And some people were skeptical that the aid is even working. Is it prolonging the fighting instead of helping to end it?
So you have these two sides, both making compelling arguments. It's a real dilemma, no easy solutions.
And the thing is, it's not just about cold, hard calculations, Costs, benefits, it goes deeper. It's about values, about what responsibility we have globally, what kind of world we want to be part of.
And that's why this is such an important conversation to have. To grasp the complexities, see things from different angles, and grapple with the tough choices ahead. Okay, so we've been looking at this Ukraine war, really digging into it, from way back historically to this whole debate about aid. But before we wrap up, let's zoom out a bit. What does all this tell us, about global alliances, about how wars might be fought in this century?
I think one of the things that really hits you is how fragile things are internationally, like the UN, the Security Council. It was supposed to prevent this kind of thing. But Russia can just veto anything, so.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, right? The systems we built, are they really up to the task now? We've got this multipolar world, power shifting, alliances aren't so clear-cut.
Right. And you look at China, India, they haven't condemned Russia, haven't joined those sanctions. It's like everyone's going their own way now, even if it means splitting from the West.
So does that mean, more instability, little regional fights turning into global blowups? Is that where we're headed?
Could be. This Ukraine war shows us that military force, it's still a big deal, even now. And when it's used, the consequences are huge, not just for the countries involved, but everyone feels
right. Energy, food, trade. We've seen how this war has messed all that up.
Yeah, it's like a reminder, how connected everything is. Even a war, way over there, it touches us all.
And it's not just the material stuff. This war, it shakes your feeling of security, right?
Yeah.
Makes you question those institutions, the idea that we have rules internationally.
Totally.
So, okay, where do we go from here? What do we learn? And how do we make things more stable, more peaceful?
I think one lesson is clear. Strong alliances matter. Look at the support Ukraine has gotten from the West, the U.S., Europe. That's been huge in helping them resist.
Right. In a world this messy, we got to stick together if we want to protect what we value.
Yeah, but alliances, they aren't enough on their own, right? We got to figure out how to talk to countries who don't see things our way, build bridges, find common ground, even if it seems impossible.
And I think maybe the most important thing is remembering peace isn't just the absence of war.
Right.
It takes more. Justice, diplomacy, upholding the rule of law, all that.
This Ukraine war, it's a tragedy, no doubt, but it's also like a wake-up call. Shows how fragile peace is and how we got to work together to build a better world.
And as we finish up this deep dive, we want to leave you with this thought. The future's not set in stone. It's what we choose to make it.
That's right.
It's about the choices we make, the actions we take, our commitment to building something better. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We hope this conversation has, given you a better understanding of this whole Ukraine situation, what it means for our world.
Yes. Thank you for listening.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into something, Well, something fascinating and important. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.